so fortunate to be here with Vena Crawley. One of the best things about this judging has been meeting Vena. Vena, this has been an amazing experience for us all on the panel. Talk to me about what surprised you from being on the panel and what didn't surprise you from being on the panel.
Oh, I think, so first of all, what didn't surprise me is the volume of talent that is out there. So the volume of the diversity. I think that was certainly one of the things that didn't surprise me. I think what surprised me in that aspect of, for that particular thread, is that we didn't get more, because I believe it's just the scratch of the surface, and I believe there's so much more talent out there.
Yeah,
and so
probably next year I'd say, Vena. I think people were just kind of wondering what this was all about.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that was really interesting that didn't surprise me was, even as a selection panel, or a filtering panel probably, because we don't really get to choose much, but as a filtering panel, it was incredible as we had lots of debates. We had our own biases, we had our own affinity process that we would go through, and I think we had many differences. But the reality is, it was probably diversity in real action, because Rob Campbell isn't there because he's a white guy representing the old establishment. Tiana isn't there because she's a Māori and she's a chick. And I'm not there because I'm gay and I'm Polynesian. Those are just aspects of what bring us into the diversity. But I think what it really demonstrated was that was really actually diversity, parts of it, equity and inclusion actually at work. Because it wasn't a majority, it wasn't I get the rule, it was actually a consensus. And in a consensus, as a lawyer, you will know, a consensus is you don't all have to agree. And I think that's the richness of the conversations that we have. So I think that was the bit that I found really interesting in the process.
So tell me about the perspective that you brought to the judging panel because of your own journey. You've been hugely successful. You've been on important boards, you've made big contributions, Vena. Tell me how your perspective affected the way you approached the judging panel.
Well, look, I'll be vulnerable. I'll put myself up here and be vulnerable. I think part of it is, I think I was probably the hardest judge, or the hardest filtering person. The reason for that is because I think the journey, somebody who's lived it, you get knocked a lot. And you have many challenges. You have an ecosystem in which you exist that just it affords opportunities more to others than it does to you. That is the reality of it. And so by that I mean, there's a phrase that was coined, and I can't remember the lovely woman's name, but it was about 30 years ago, around white privilege. And just the simple fact is that because she was white, she was afforded more privileges than for somebody that was not. And that's just the way the world was. That wasn't to say that she was racist. That's not to say that all white people are bad and so forth, and that I am better. It just says that's the ecosystem. So those sort of things hardened me. And so I kind of went into this process with quite a high standard, only because I have lived what it's like to have to exist and to survive and to get to executive level and to governance level, being somebody that is different and somebody that has all these elements that brings in. So I think that was the thing that I started in bringing it in. And the other one is it came in with those experiences taught me that you have to have a certain level of layering to be able to succeed. And that layering is what I use as part of my filtering process when I brought that to the table. And I'm happy to explain that further down the track. But I think that's the reality. The world is no longer predictable, Manny. The world is, everyone talks about VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And there are a lot of wicked problems that need to be solved by businesses. And doing that just with a traditional governance model, my personal opinion is I think it will do better to serve its market, to serve its customers by including more diverse perspectives, views, perceptions, approaches, And so I think those things were really key into bringing that into this process for me and for the people.
Yeah, so Mr. Crawley, you do that a lot on the boards that you're on. You must do, because your performance on this panel was outstanding.
Oh.
But that requires courage. It isn't just about expertise. It's not just about skills. It isn't just about experience, but it's about being courageous. It's about being brave. It's about empathy and, EQ and all of those things. But it is so much safer just to stay quiet. Talk to me about the characteristics you need as a diverse board-ready director to make a difference.
Okay. This is a big question, and it's a great question, and it's one that I'm going to hopefully try and articulate. And if I don't get it right, I'll try a few other angles. The first is, in the words of the great RuPaul, the drag queen, I'm very much like RuPaul. For many years, my differences were used by myself to hide myself because I didn't want to stand out. But the reality is, as soon as I woke up to the fact that actually I wasn't born to fit in, I was actually born to stand out. And so, thank you, RuPaul. With that, I made the decision that I would stand out. Now, when it comes to the courage that's needed, I talked about the layers of what's required, I believe. So my view is sorry, before I get into that, I think the answer to your question, May, sits on two sides of the equation. One is for the board themselves, and the other is for the person or the candidate themselves. I think it's really important because there are lessons and learnings and changes that have to happen on both sides. But the layers are, I think, first and foremost, a board should represent the market in which they serve. That in itself is really interesting because does every board, does every management team believe that they are there to serve? And in my experience, that's questionable in many ways because, for all sorts of reasons of our own egos and the way in which we're brought up. And that's not to say my boards have all been like that, but certainly my observations and things across from other things that I've been exposed to. The second is that diversity in itself is not a one size fits all. So don't think that you can go, what's that song by When the Cat's Away, Melting Pot. Don't just go add 2 teaspoons of diversity, stir, and it's done. I think there's elements of that which exist today. And again, that's because there's a learning on how it is that you cope with that. So to the layers, which I think is really important. The layers, given those other factors, is I believe that diversity in itself is a strategic advantage. I believe the layers are that everyone who can make a valuable contribution at a board should have a core discipline that you come from. So you are a lawyer, I am a marketing and sales and culture person. Those are my core disciplines. That's how I rose up through the ranks. And you need to have demonstrated, I believe, at that level 1, operational excellence, so that you need to have demonstrated what you do to that. The second layer, I believe, is what I call a transformative capability. So that for me is about strategic and execution excellence. So the challenge to boards is diversity isn't about having an accountant, a lawyer, a government person, and a risk specialist. Actually, there should be attributes of it. But transformative capability is one that is, if you've ever run and executed a transformation of an organization, like actually from beginning to an end, that says that I've taken my core discipline of marketing, sales, culture, I've woven in process, technology, innovation, all those other elements that are required to have a good, healthy business for a healthy market and to serve our customers. That's transformative capability. And I believe that that's one of the evolutions that boards are needing to move to. Is you need to look for people that have transformation experience. You need to look for people that have what I call social anthropology or consumer anthropology experience. You need to look for people that have innovation. Innovation is not a skill set, it's a mindset, it's a way of being. You operate, you think differently, and innovation would have helped serve that transformation based off a core capability. And so that's layer 2. The third layer, which I think is the one that we talk here, is I don't think diversity is about race. It's not only about race, gender, sexuality, socioeconomic, religion, all of those things. They are, but I think it's not, it's an and. So I think the third layer is what I call intersectional diversity.
Cool.
And so by intersectional diversity, I believe that is what, in English, is your lived experience.
Mm.
And so for me, for example, I am a migrant child who came to this country unable to speak English. I lived below the poverty line, and so I am a person of brown skin. I am gay. I have children, so I'm a father, a same-sex couple who has children. And the reasons those are important is not because I like to talk about myself, is because from that beginning, I'm very fortunate now that I now live in the 1% of the most expensive areas in the country. I now speak 5 languages, not just try and do my pidgin English and my Samoan. Those elements have all changed. And so the journey that my lived experience to have gone from this side to this side, and I'm not saying, look, one is better in some ways and other is better in other ways.
No, but you've lived the range. That's what you're saying.
I've lived that range, and that intersectional diversity and the experiences that come with that, I believe, are exceptionally valuable for businesses today if you are to serve the markets in which you represent. So a question to the board. So we flip to the board side. Does your board represent the market in which you serve?
Yes, but most importantly, Vena, when they get somebody who has had that range of experience, who's been powerful and powerless, and who's come from the wrong side of town, who wasn't born in privilege with a silver spoon, are they able to maximise that contribution? Or
the challenge, May, is it's difficult. And that's the hardened aspect of me for the candidates that we're putting forward. It isn't always going to be a pretty ride. And don't expect that I or any of the panel went, oh yeah, they're brown or they're woman or they're Asian, they get in, tick. No way. Those layers that I talked about were very important, certainly in my process for doing it. And the reason it's so hard, May, because you operate in your differences and you have a way of being. When you go into a board or you're accepted into a board for that, that board operates in a paradigm that is now taking in a new ingredient. So add diversity and stir doesn't work. And so there's a learning on the candidate. But for myself, I had to adapt aspects of my language. I had to adapt aspects of my culture. I had to understand more. So I had to really shut up and listen to try and understand, how does this place work? What are the processes? What's the structures in here? What's the organizational norms? What's the culture that fits in here? Things that we do naturally when you go from that side to this side, right? Because you have to figure it all out using other means of communication. And then you go forward with some of that. And I think that some of that requires you to give some sacrifices or some trade-offs. As to I don't believe you can go and just be, I am Crawley, I am, and you will accept me come hell or high water. Actually, no. You, Crawley, also have to figure out that you have to build. That's not to say to sacrifice. Growing up, my mother, who couldn't speak English and all, but in translation, she used to say she never wanted us children to assimilate. She used to draw Venn diagrams, and the Venn diagram was Samoa and her, my dad, and the other Venn diagram was New Zealand. New Zealand. And in the middle, she used to shade that out, and she used to put us children in that middle. And she used to say, this is your job. Your job as you grow up is to expand the shaded bit and make that the bigger part of the Venn diagram. And her translation was, she never wanted us, or my parents never wanted us to assimilate, because the assimilation means you have to give up everything to then become. But she wanted us to acculturize. And I guess that's what I'm saying is the role of the individual as you come into this board is that you have to acculturize. And then the aspect for the board is the board has to do the same thing in return. And I'm sure if you talk to You know, I've been trained by the best, and I've been so fortunate. If you talk to Joan Withers, if you talk to Dame Therese, if you talk to Rob Campbell, if you talk to Mark Verbeest, you know, I am different and I've had to make changes, but the board also has to be really clear what process they need to change, what structures, what's the agenda process, how do you hear all voices meaningfully? Because as I place something onto the table in my way and my form, that will be foreign to not just the people that were on the selection committee, but for all of those that may not have been. They're going to be like, what the hell is this guy? You know, and so they, and certainly my experience in life is differences for the most part are not embraced by others. Differences are, you know, are often challenging and can be feared. And so as a child growing up, I hid my differences because I wanted to try and fit in. And I didn't listen to the lesson of my parents. And so now, which is kind of strange, the world has kind of flipped. And I don't want to be known for being brown. I don't want to be known because I don't want to be picked because I'm brown. I don't want to be picked because I am gay. You know, I want to be picked for that intersectional diversity, plus the fact that I have transformative capability, plus I have a core discipline. I want, you know, I want that. I want to be seen in that light. And so I kind of shy away. And you know, part of my filters now is, no, I don't want to be picked just because I'm your diversity tick. Sorry, thanks very much, but not interested.
Well, so, I mean, no one could think you're a diversity tick. I just was so grateful for all of the ideas that you had, and they were great ideas. But more than that, Vena, you rolled up your sleeves and you did all the mahi as well. You did the hard work. You're astounding.
We all did. It's a team effort. It's a team.
Wow.
If you take that back to how we grew up, or our parents grew up, you grew up in a village.
Yeah.
And that's how you work. I was, you know, my parents didn't raise me as such. My father came to New Zealand. I never saw him for 4 years because he was here trying to make a life in New Zealand. And there was my mother with 4 children trying to make a living in Samoa. And so you get raised by more than one person. And so you see how society works. And so, look, thank you for that. But it was definitely mahi on behalf of everybody, especially you, and especially, I think, the hero, Renee Clark.
Renee!
One of the secret and invisible heroes of this whole thing, but you may not all see her, everybody, but I want to say her name, Renee Clark.
Renee Clark, and I will interview her. I'll make her be interviewed. Let me ask you this one final question. You are in the best possible position to give advice to those on the diverse board ready list. What is your best advice for them to get on a board, but make sure once they're on there, they make a difference?
Yeah. So I would say be really clear why you want that. I think it's really important. Don't do it for a status reason. Don't do it, you know, because it's the next part of your script. Do it because it is a contribution to a movement or a purpose that is greater than ourselves. And I know that sounds really woo, but I really do believe that you need to be really clear as to why it is that you want to be on this board. So when I was very fortunately selected by Sir Stephen Tyndall and Joan Withers for the Warehouse Board as a future director, I had to be really clear that it was something that I wanted and that there would be an environment that would accept my contributions and that I would be accepted in a form. It had to be, I had to be clear to me that they were up for disruptive in a positive sense, because I'm known as a disruptive accelerant, and I needed to make sure that that's what they were looking for. And so I think as a candidate, be really clear as to what that is. And then for the board, I think they need to be clear about why it is. So it's not just add 2 teaspoons of diversity and stir and to look good for a report or annual report. And I'm not saying that that's what they do, but I think that's important. The other one is, I think you need to stand in your own light. And by standing in your own light, it is taking all the intersectional diversity in addition to your transformative capability and your core discipline, and actually stand in it and own it and be proud of it and be able to contribute in that way with that, and not it's not afraid, and not, yeah, I guess it's courage is one. I don't know if it's courage, but just stand in the light and be positive in the sense of what your contribution is actually has value, no matter what it is. And it's not everything will have value, but have that positivity to put that out into the room. I think that is something that will be really important. And then the last thing I say is, don't be a purist. Don't sit there and say, you know, I'm brown, I'm queer, get used to it. You know, the reality is, yeah, you got to make some trade-offs, and that's really important, because you can't evolve the ecosystem unless you're part of it. And by standing on the outer circle, holding your firm position is, I'm for Maoridom, I'm for diversity, I'm for gay people, I'm for brown people. It isn't going to work, I don't believe, which is why I like intersectional diversity better. And so the example I give for that is my darling mother-in-law, my late father-in-law. I've been with my partner together now coming up 30 years. And for 10 years, I was never really invited to the family Christmas party. I was kind of hidden. And so when we finally got around to being invited and all the rest of it, my partner was very upset with his mother and was angry and all the rest of it. And the thing that my mother taught me was that I said to him, hey, at that stage, your mother is 70. And our lifestyle and the way in which we operate is foreign to her. It is a different way of being. And it wasn't, I mean, and it's not that it didn't exist in her time, it was probably more hidden. And I said, but the reality is, we can't expect her to accept this thing 100%. And so therefore, us trying to shove it down her throat isn't going to get her to engage and open up to allow us to come in, so that she can experience and feel us as a couple, and that it doesn't alter him, and that I'm a nice person, and that I'm not a gold digger, and that I'm not a, you know, all these other things. And I think that's important, a lesson when you come onto this board, is don't be a purist about it, and make sure that you trade off and that you offer things that you want to say, well, because the collaboration is going to be, in order to help the chair, in order to help your fellow board directors, you need to give something. And it's not just a firm view on what your views are and what your, you know, what your diverse thinking is going to be. So I don't know if that's, you know, that will be my lessons and from the scars that I've learned.
Wow.
And the last thing, so one more, drop your ego, leave your ego at the door. There's no place for anyone's ego. And I think that's important for everybody, because you are all here, we are all here to serve, and to serve the markets, communities, our customers, and our people.
Vena, I've learned so much from this interview. I've learned so much from you during this panel process. I see you. I understand you. I think that what you have to contribute is amazing. I look forward to serving on a board with you.
Oh,
I
me too.
Always to be in my village. I now have my hand firmly on you for the Surfeit Diversity Institute. If you want to understand the marketing and most of the work that was done, it's mostly directed by Vena, saying, well, what if we did it this way? So I just want to thank you so much, Vena, for your contribution, but for being you. And can I just say, being you is marvelous, because you're so talented and so able. And I look forward to working with you in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very, very, very much.